Welcome to the Room to Bloom podcast, equipping you to live redefined, renewed, and restored. I'm your host, Julie Raboa. Let's tackle this week's topic. Welcome back to the Room to Bloom podcast. This week I have a special guest, Jake Fox, and today he's going to talk with us about a time that he was really in a place of despair and how he came to be in a place of joy. So Jake, welcome. Thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on as a guest. So I'm in my late 40s, originally from Missouri, made stops in Atlanta and also Colorado. We're in Nashville now, just outside of Nashville. Have a wife, a wonderful person, and two great kids. They're still elementary aged, and we're just very thankful to be together as a family and have a good life.
That's fantastic. But I know that your life didn't start out in this really great place where you had, a family and a wife, and you didn't feel like you were in such a blessed place at a different point in your life. Could you tell us some more about that?
Yeah. So when I was real young, my parents were together. My dad had some difficulties from his childhood, had some issues and concerns like we all do, but he ended up going to Vietnam. He served there for a period. And then through the way, he did acquire Agent Orange, more than likely. And he saw some things there that obviously were very, they didn't have a framework for PTSD or things like that at the time. So a lot of the people came back in a difficult place. And myself, when my brothers and I, we ended up having some really wonderful times with him, but it was kind of sporadic. He had taken to the bottle at that point and had his own demons that he was struggling with. Through some of those struggles, he did also have about a sobriety as well. He was able to get sober for a period. And then at that point, he was tremendous. It was a family of us, and we were enjoying, time together and vacations and things like that. And one day, my brother and I, we got into a pretty big disagreement late at night. And over the course of that fight, my father kind of got into it and broke us up and sent us to bed. Pretty angry that night, just really frustrated with life. And then the next day, we got home from school and walked into his room, and I was shocked, just in total shock, to see that he was laying on the floor, and just probably sat there for 5 minutes staring at him, knowing but not really able to accept or process that he had died. And that was such a terrible thing that happened to us and our family. We, not only my brothers and I, lost our father, but our mother lost her spouse. And that sent us all into different, all four of us really, were into different directions. Some handled that differently. I handled that through, at first, just checked out. There are stages that people go through. Mine was denial for a very long time, until about a year later, when it really sunk in that this is my new normal, that I don't have a father. And at that point, I was 14 when he passed, and I was around 15 or so, I started getting into alcohol and went on to other drugs as well. And for about the next 10 years of my life, it was just constant disruption with relationships. I spent a lot of time involved in the alcohol and drugs, and just really in a very bad place emotionally. So that was a very long time, and it's difficult sometimes to talk about, but I've had some good moments since then that have helped to bring about some healing from that. So that's kind of the origin story of the trauma that I experienced.
Well, it sounds like there probably was a lot of trauma just in your childhood growing up, having a dad who had probably some PTSD that wasn't treated, And so did he have difficulty dealing with his emotions?
Yeah, at times he did. It's so long ago at this point. One of the ways that I handled my trauma back then was to hide emotionally. And I think I got some of my extreme hidden but underlying anger from him as well. Because there were times when he was pretty angry. And I can't speak for other people, but I know I kind of got some force at times from him, which I consider to be a little extreme. But when you're a kid, you're not sure how to handle those things.
Right. And sometimes we learn what is modeled for us. We learn how to handle emotions in situations by watching our parents' example. And so I know that that can be common for a lot of people. But in addition to that, you were dealing with a dad who was drinking and maybe wasn't there for you during those times, but then during those periods of sobriety, he was a great dad. So, I mean, that must have been really tough as well.
Yeah, it was. Knowing that he had his own struggles at the time, I didn't have any context for that. I just knew what I wanted from him that I wasn't receiving, which was his attention, his love, his affirmation. And he did pass away at a very bad time for a boy, when that's when I was going to really start transitioning to some degree into my, teen and advanced teen years and becoming a man. And I missed out on a lot of what he could have given to me over those years.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I know I lost my dad as well, but I had him as a teen. And so from your story, it sounds like you were the one who found your dad when he had passed away and you were only 14. How did that affect you?
Yeah, I was the one to discover him. And he was in the middle of folding laundry, it looked like, and just normal, everyday things, And the way I initially handled that was not only just through denial, but I immediately began to distance myself from him, from his memory, and sort of detach my identity from anything to do with him. Because the emotions that I would feel when I would think about him were so raw and painful that the only way I could not feel those feelings was to push his memory away completely. So I lost my identity as his son for many, many years after that. So I became a fatherless boy.
And so it seemed like that trauma that you experienced, it followed you into adulthood. It sounds like you turned to alcohol and some drugs as maybe a way to cope or escape, but then it followed you into your adulthood and created some other issues. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the ways that I responded to the events that happened to me was not only distancing myself from my father's identity and my own, but I also sort of shunned all of masculinity. I began to spend most of my time only with women or girls, and I would befriend them. And some of them I did have relationships with, and those would always end poorly because I did not understand properly how to treat women, how to respect and cherish my friendships with them. And over the course of the years, that lack of masculinity and affirming identity from a male really caused me a lot of heartache in terms of the way not only I related to females, but also any potential friendships I would have with guys. They were always surface level, uh, but there was always this ticking time bomb underneath all of the superficial relationships that I had because I couldn't handle any type of deep involvement of any type of real conversations with people. So if people wanted to talk about sports or, the kind of the fun aspects of life, I could handle those. But if someone were to ask me motives and why I do things the way I do, or I would notice that I would very quickly sort of emotionally self-implode, and it would turn into passive aggressive behavior. It would turn into sometimes aggressive behavior, just, outbursts of just rage and anger. And people around me could see that I was a relational disaster, but only through the course of denial again and the pride that comes with that was I able to continue to not relate well to anybody.
So what kind of consequence did you experience to where you're like, hey, I think something needs to change? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of work at this point, to pull
Yeah.
out all of these different things that you now recognize. But what did it take to get you to that point?
Well, there are parts of my history and my story that are so damaging to others, and I don't ever want to be cryptic or hide anything. I also know that I want to protect people that I have hurt in some pretty serious ways. So I try to be vague enough, but also specific enough. But there were incidents of just rage and anger, specifically to some people that I had dated, and it was through restraining orders, going into mental hospitals, and just feeling that isolation. But the main catalyst for this was during one event. I did something that was so traumatic to me and to others that I couldn't find any way to healing. It had been almost 10 years at this point of just anger, and depression, and I cut on myself a lot, just destructed every relationship, and there was no path for me to healing. And I thought that I was a sorry excuse for human, and my only solution was to take my own life at that point. I was driving. I was in a back country, and I just got my car going as fast as I could, and I knew that when I saw the right tree, that I was about to take my last breath. Through the next few turns and the corners of the road, I saw an opportunity, and at that exact moment, I finally found the solution to what I was looking for. And I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but now I'm able to, through self-reflection and some other things, to figure out exactly what had happened. So Jesus showed up is what happened. I felt, instead of despair and pain and the suicidal thoughts and an attempt on my own life, he took it all away in an instant. And I felt nothing but total and complete peace in every aspect of my body and in my heart. And somehow, even though I was crying so hard I could not even see the road, I was able to steer to safety and just kind of pause long enough to go, okay, something changed. I don't know what it is, but, I went to a mental hospital for a period, and someone came in and started asking questions. And it was through that conversation I realized that God had saved me, that Jesus showed up in a way that really brought the peace of life that only he can provide was given to me in an instant. And I'm just so thankful for that moment.
So for listeners who might be thinking what I'm thinking, could you please clarify what you mean by Jesus showed up? Did you see Jesus? Did he overwhelm
Yeah.
you with his presence? Like, how did that manifest for you?
Yeah. So there wasn't any type of visual. It was mainly just such a powerful presence of love in my heart. And it was so it's hard to explain, because how can you put your finger on when Jesus just does something like that? But it was complete and total peace, and it was the hope that things could actually feel better. So it was more of a sense in my heart of that things were going to change from this point on.
And so after you felt just that overwhelming sense of love and peace, somehow your car steered away, even though you really couldn't see because you were crying. So your car steered away from the tree, and you ended up not crashing. And then from
Yeah,
that point, did you realize that you needed some help and we went to the mental hospital, or did somebody encourage you to do that? How did that happen?
it was both. I knew in my heart that things had to change, that was the death of the old me at that point. And through conversations with a few family members and people that loved me very deeply, I was able to come to the point where I knew that I needed some serious help, that I couldn't just continue on. So I did willingly go. I had to make the choice. It was a very difficult choice to finally admit that I was so broken that I needed someone else to come in and provide for me from a professional level the help that I had been truly seeking. Because to this point, my mom had repeatedly asked me to go see her counselor, and I refused every time because I knew that going and seeking professional help was not only going to cause me to open up those parts of my heart that I had locked away for so long, but I knew the process of unpacking that would be very painful as well. And I was always wanting to avoid that. But at this point, I did have a choice that was my rock bottom and that I needed to move forward with professional help.
So you hit rock bottom, you're in the mental health institution, and you meet a guy and he says, that encounter you had was Jesus. And so you became a Christian. And can you tell us how that decision to give your life to Christ began to transform your life?
Yeah. So from that moment on, I began to feel a version of the same peace that I had felt that day when I made an attempt on my own life. Not only did I have hope for life again, which I hadn't had experienced in quite some time, but I also knew that through the process of forming new friendships, finding new people to spend my time with, I had to make a transition and not just becoming a Christian, but also to distance myself from people that I was hanging out with before because of our relationships were mainly based upon taking drugs or, other things that were not going to be consistent with my life moving forward. That did continue for a period of time when I was able to make tremendous progress through new friendships, but there was always that underlying, there's still more work that you need to do. So at first I thought I did all the healing and all the processing that I needed to do. But over the course of the following years, some of that did come back again to a much lesser degree, but the underlying trauma and those painful points in my past were still present.
So are you saying that you had a small episode of relapse at some point?
Yeah. When I began finally dating again after some of those incidents, it was opening up my heart again in ways that I hadn't before. And so that kind of was the doorway for some of the self-doubt, some of the self-loathing, some of the other thoughts that I had, like you're going to repeat in this new relationship the things that you've done in the past. Because, once I started opening myself up again, my heart to potentially love again, it was a brutal awakening just because some of that depression did sort of come back, but I was able to sort of self-manage that, but only for a period of time. It was a very difficult time in my life as well.
Well, I think it's important to point that out. I know it was difficult, but for many people, healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It has ups and downs and twists and turns, and we do take 2 steps forward and sometimes we take 1 step back. But that doesn't mean we're not moving in the right direction. So I'm sure you had some tools that you could rely on to help get you back into that forward momentum. Would you say that was true?
Yeah, definitely. Since I had become a Christian and I started attending church, I was able to form new friendships with people that were a lot more mature in the faith than me, and people that had wisdom and insight into the process that the heart takes through some of these ups and downs in life. Most of the time I was pretty receptive to that, but eventually pride got to me again This time, instead of just complete brokenness and the pride of not wanting to admit that I had a problem, I began to have religious pride because I began to get affirmation from people in the Christian world for some of my knowledge, information. I really began to study the Bible intently and study apologetics and all these different topics surrounding Christian history and all of that. So I was able to push away some of the offers of help just enough in order to maintain what I thought was a good image for my church standing.
So that point, I think, is also important because sometimes we can look great on the surface, but beneath there's still things in our heart that needs to be addressed. And those are things that only Jesus can help us to overcome. And so why do you feel that throughout your whole healing process, you tried a whole bunch of different things, but really, why was Jesus such an important element to your healing overall, holistically?
Well, the main thing that made an impression on me was Jesus was an ever-present help in time of trouble. And he was also present during all of the painful memories that I had when I was young. So he was the only one that could provide enough context to what had happened and what the path was for addressing and healing it. Through the course of my journey up to this point, he had been included to a degree, but kind of as an afterthought. Only when some of the counselors that I had seen at that point, they were really great, but Jesus was not the main one directing my healing journey. When I began to fully embrace that, that was through another traumatic time. And that's when I fully surrendered that process and that journey to him.
Now, you mentioned counseling. Were you in secular counseling or Christian counseling, or have you done a combination of both?
So at the time, the people that had counseled me were mainly people that weren't credentialed, that didn't have the formal training that probably I would have benefited from a lot more. So they were mainly mentors and people that I thought were really wonderful. But when that relationship I'd mentioned a minute ago, that when I began to open up again and some of that, the pain started showing up again, that relationship did last for about 5 years. And it was through her realizing that I had been emotionally abusive for her that she decided that she was no longer going to be a part of my life. And when the pastor the church we went to and some friends came to me, and I said, I'll do whatever I need to. I just want to get her back. And they said, you need to focus on your own healing and let the results be where they are. Because to this point, they had noticed a few things, some of my behaviors that were a little bit on the passive aggressive side, a little bit of the intimidating side. And I had always kind of dismissed them. But when that happened, there was no denying the pain that I had caused. And at that point, I did go see a professional Christian counselor. He's also an ordained minister, very, very, very intelligent man, very good. He worked with me. It was a true fit for both of us because I was so eager to finally find the healing. And he brought Jesus into the sessions in ways that I was not exposed to before. So his help, along with some of the clarity that we invited Jesus into, was what really transitioned me out of that deep, dark place that I had entered into again.
Well, and I would say also that the transitioning that you did away from your old life towards new friends, towards new mentors, really push you in a position of being lifted up in a moment where you were really struggling. And I actually just wrote a blog post about that just this week, about how environment can really set us up for success or failure. And sometimes we have to move away from the old things, the people that want to drag us back into the things we're trying to be freed from. And so I think that was really wise on your part and set you up for a position to be helped and to just really dig in a little bit deeper into those really tough areas. And that takes a lot of humility as well. Pride cannot be a part of a healing journey at all. We have to set that aside. But also, when you were speaking a little bit earlier, you talked about depression, and sometimes medical intervention is necessary when someone's experiencing depression or suicidal ideation, contemplating wanting to take their own life. What would you say to a person who might be on the fence about taking medication, who might feel like doing that is not acting in faith?
Yeah, it's a subject like that definitely needs to be approached with prayer. I had been previously in a place where I was really hesitant in any way to even consider that. But through the events that we were just talking about, there was a time when I did seek out some medical intervention, and I did get on medication for a period of time. And it really was needed, I think, for me. It was good for my situation. And I would just encourage somebody, if this has been something that has been presented to you as an option, please don't just dismiss that entirely right up front. Just kind of sit with it, bring it to God, maybe find some trusted friends to have a very frank conversation with, because there was a time that it was definitely something that helped me in my walk.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story, because I know for many Christians, they want to do what is right and what God wants. And it's a decision that can be made between that person and their doctors. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. What would you say to somebody, since you're now on the other side? You're no longer in a place of despair, but in a place of joy. What would you say to somebody right now who is listening to this and who is contemplating ending their life or even making a plan to do so?
Well, first of all, please know that there are people out there that understand exactly what you're going through. There are so many similarities with what I've experienced that I've spoken with others about. There was a time just a few years ago, my suicide attempt was back in the 1990s. Late 90s. So we're many, many years beyond that now. But I still remember very clearly some of my thoughts and the way I was feeling. I would say there's hope. There is hope for you. I know a couple years ago, I was working for a large parachurch organization. And one of my responsibilities was to handle incoming calls. And I spoke with a lot of people who were calling concerned because of their a loved one or a family, that was also having these same issues and suicidal thoughts and ideations. I was able to use my experience and speak directly to these people that are just reaching out in concern. And I was able to provide some help and insight and context. And please, please don't give in to the thought that you're a bad person. Don't give in to the thought that your life is not valuable. Your life is very valuable to God. Your life is valuable to your friends. I know in the moment of pain, it doesn't feel like it. It did not feel like it to me. But there is going to be a better life for you if you just follow the process. Sometimes it's going to take more than just becoming a Christian or to resubmitting or whatever framework that you feel like you have. Just hang on a little bit longer and do what you need to do to take the necessary steps to find help that you're looking for. Because on the other side of that is joy and peace.
So, Jake, you mentioned the process. What steps would you recommend to somebody who wants to shift their mindset from a place of utter despair to a place of hope and joy and fulfillment? What is that process?
The first thing is, do not isolate yourself. Don't do this alone. Find somebody trusted that you can open up to. Find some type of, if it's a pastor, a priest, elder in a church, if it's go to a hospital, just go to the nearest emergency center if you need to. A phone call that you can get text messages, you can get someone on the phone, and just share what you're thinking, share what you're feeling, because isolation and continuing to think and process the way that you are, that's not going to lead you down the road to healing and redemption and to bring about the life that you truly want to live.
So you're saying don't isolate, to reach out to anyone, a
Mm-hmm.
pastor, a friend, a mental health center, the emergency. And I also wanted to mention that there is a national suicide and crisis lifeline available in the United States. And you can text, you can chat, you can call, and it is 988. So that is available for you to speak with somebody immediately if you want to. And then they also have a website. So that link will be in the show notes for anybody who feels that that is a good resource for them. Beyond that, Jake, do you have any additional recommended resources for listeners that have really helped you come out of a place of depression and despair?
Yeah, I do. So a lot of what helped me was the book Wild at Heart, which is by John Eldredge. I know it's a specific for men, but he and his wife, Stacy, wrote a book that's more geared towards women, and that's called Captivating. My wife and I have gone through both of those books. We've gone through studies at church with them, with other people. There's another, a devotional book by L.B. Cowman. It's called Streams in the Desert. This came out, I can't remember exactly when, it's probably 100 years ago at this point. So it's like a century old. It's a devotional for someone that had lost their spouse and were dealing with a lot of the dark places in their heart following what had happened. So we also have, there's a book by Larry Crabb called Connecting, and it talks a little bit about how he was a trained professional counselor and had noticed that talk therapy was very, very helpful. But what people were really looking for is that human connection with somebody else to really share their story in a safe place. And he found tremendous results in just seeking human connection in a safe place with some of these people.
Well, thank you so much. We'll put those in the show notes as well. So hopefully those resources will be helpful. So Jake, I know you really love the term reconstructing grace. What does that
Yes.
mean to you?
So reconstructing grace, there are a lot of people that, in the Christian world these days, they're doing what's called deconstructing their faith, which in a lot of cases, unfortunately, that causes them, basically what they're doing is they're taking the some of the things that they learned growing up in church and Sunday school and things like that, and they're rejecting or deconstructing all of that to the point where they're abandoning the faith completely. And sometimes it's healthy to question a few things that we learned, but when we do that, there's a way to reorganize our thoughts and focus them instead of on the processes that we learned and how we did things, to just focus on Jesus again, because he's the author and perfecter of our faith. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he's the only way to real, abundant, true life. And he came to set us free from all the things that have held us back for so long. So it's kind of something I'm beginning to launch. It's mainly just to reach out to people and say, there's a way to go through the process of thinking things differently without actually abandoning your faith, because for me, it's strengthened my faith a whole lot.
So with that, do you have a favorite scripture that you'd like to share that would encourage somebody who may be feeling hopeless today?
Yeah. So many, many years ago now, I came across Matthew 11:28 through 30, and it immediately became my favorite passage. And as many verses as I've read, there's nothing that really approaches the level of peace that this one provides. It says, and this is Jesus speaking, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." the things that Jesus gives to us bring peace, they bring life, they bring hope. And that's what I want to leave with everybody today. Just remember that present in the Garden of Eden is the tree of life. And one day we'll get to partake from that in the kingdom because it's there in the end in Revelation. In the meantime, just remember that there's a God that loves us so much more, that wants to redeem the painful points in our past and to set us free for a life of love and serving other people.
Perfectly said. Jake, how can listeners find out more about your Reconstructing Grace ministry?
Yeah, so there on Facebook, there is a Reconstructing Grace page. I've also just got my regular Facebook page. It's Jake Fox Photo. If you are looking on there, you'll be able to locate me that way as well. But if you just wanted to get in touch with email, it's reconstructinggrace@gmail.com. And I would look forward to hearing from anybody. If you have any questions, anything you'd like to talk about, please reach out. I'd love to chat with you.
Perfect. All right. So we'll put those links in the show notes as well, so you can get in touch with him if you would like. But thank you so much, Jake, for having just this really candid conversation about where you were and where you got today with Jesus. And so I know that there's hope for people out there. So thanks again, and God bless your new ministry.
Thank you, Julie. I just wanted to thank you personally for your heart for doing this podcast. It's great. I'm thankful to be on here, and I can't wait to chat again sometime.
All right. I'm sure we will. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode has blessed you. If so, please subscribe, comment, and share. It's a great way to spread the love and keep good content rolling. As a reminder, this podcast is purely for informational and educational purposes only. Listening to content is not a replacement for medical or mental health care. Please make decisions with your personal care providers. Stay tuned for next week's episode. But if you want more content or free resources in the meantime, head over to FromBudToBloom.com. See you next time. Until then, live fully free in Christ.